Everybody, I'm Stan Odenthal with WorkforceKO, and thanks for joining us on this new series, How to Find, Use, and Understand Legal Resources for WIOA and Federal Workforce Programs. So this is a WorkforceKO training series. You can find more training and especially a lot of workforce development related programs at workforceko.com. So today we're going to focus a lot on understanding the complexities of federal laws, regulations, as well as federal guidance. We're going to get into state policies. We're going to talk about local area policies as well, and how all of those things work together. So let's jump into this. So looking at this first slide, you're going to see that we're going to talk primarily from the perspective of WIOA, so the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That piece of federal workforce legislation that was passed in 2014. So we're going to be using that as a reference point for this conversation. However, because we're talking about federal laws and regulations, this conversation really is applicable to any federal workforce program, as well as just kind of any federal law in general. This is going to be a similar process when we're talking about how federal laws are made, how federal regulations are made, what opportunities federal agencies have for guidance, and how that trickles down sometimes to state and local players. In this case, state level workforce development boards, state agencies that oversee these programs, as well as local workforce development boards and local service providers and administrative entities that oversee these programs. So looking at this diagram that I put on the screen, if you start over there on the left, you see where everything is derived. This is the law itself, and we'll get into more of how a law is created, but for now I just want to focus on this diagram of building step upon step and understanding how everything flows back to the original first step, which is the creation of that federal law. And so in this case, it's WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and that establishes the framework for everything we're going to be talking about. Once a federal law is created and passed by Congress, then the federal agencies that it applies to, they have the opportunity to create regulations. And so regulations, those are permanent rules developed by the agencies to help better define the law. So you're looking at opportunities to create a little bit more clarification, definitions. If there's some kind of gray areas, hopefully that kind of clears some things up within the federal law itself. So in the context of this conversation of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, we're talking primarily about the U.S. Department of Labor as well as the U.S. Department of Education, because the primary players within the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act were those two agencies. And so those were the ones that were creating these federal regulations. And we'll talk about that process as well in some of these slides. Next, moving on to the following step is the guidance opportunities. And so again, U.S. Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Education, these are the federal agencies that oversee this program. If it was a different law with a different federal agency, then it would be up to that agency to issue out guidance. But in this case, we're looking at those agencies. We're going to pay particular attention to the U.S. Department of Labor and some of the guidance letters that they release on a regular basis. And so their Employment and Training Administration, which is just kind of a subdivision within the U.S. Department of Labor, they create regular guidance letters to help clarify the regulations, clarify WIOA. And so we'll take a look at some of those guidance letters, what that looks like, how that process is made and overall, helps the overall flow of information down to the states and local areas. Next item, number 4, is state policies. So these are state level interpretation and adaptation of federal law, regulations, and guidance. Some states with these federal workforce programs also establish state laws and regulations. That can be another component of things. However, we're going to be talking more on just the policy perspective of how that state develops policies to implement the federal programs. And so, as I mentioned before, again, as we get to each of these steps, they have to be in harmony with the previous steps. And so that's whatever state policies are created, a state can't just go out and do something that is completely off the rails and not associated with the federal law or the federal regulations in the implementation of the program. It needs to be in compliance with it. However, typically the federal law and federal regulations give some pretty good discretion to the states to design their some elements of their programs. And so that's what the state will do through the state planning process as well as through state policies. And so we'll get into both of those as well. And then that trickles down to the local workforce development areas. Not every state has local workforce development areas. Some states, especially some smaller populated states, have just, the state runs the program. It's what's considered a single area state. But the majority of states do have local workforce development boards, workforce development areas. And as those areas try to implement these workforce programs at the local level, what they're trying to do is create and craft policies that are in harmony with the law, in harmony with the federal regulations, in harmony with federal guidance, in harmony with state policies. However, they're tailored to the needs of that community that they serve or those counties that they serve. And so it gives the local area that opportunity to customize these policies and create, some great policies at the local level that are unique to the needs of the people that they serve, the job seekers they serve, the businesses that they serve. So some of the resources we're going to be looking at today include looking at the U.S. Department of Labor Employment and Training Administration website. There's some fantastic resources on that website that help to clarify things within the federal law or federal regulations. And so we'll look at some of the tools there. We'll look at the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act itself, the federal law. I'll give you kind of a brief overview of how to read some of the sections within that law, understanding the differences between titles and chapters and sections, all of that fun stuff. We'll look at the WIOA regulations. We'll look at it from the U.S. Department of Labor perspective, from the education perspective, and then we'll pull out some important regulations as well as law provisions that are talked about on a regular basis that you probably need to know. We'll at least kind of send you in the right direction to take a look at some of those resources. And so that'll include WIOA Section 188, which is focused on the non-discrimination and equal opportunity regulations. Also the uniform guidance, which